The Born to Win podcast highlights individuals excelling at high levels in their purpose and calling. This podcast is for anyone looking to get ahead in life and willing to take action and reach their full potential. Using C.H.A.M.P.S male mentoring model of the 3 E's, education, empowerment, and exposure, it means you too are born to win.
Yo, welcome back to another Born to Win podcast. Yes, I'm Vondale Singleton, your host, and listen, do not move. Lock in right now because we have a special guest and I'm so excited to introduce her. It is International Women's Month. And so we want to celebrate our queens and make sure that we are uplifting. That's right. Our community of women who are leading this nation in this world. So without further ado, we have Miss Curry. She's entering her second season with the Chicago Bulls. All right. So listen to this. She oversees community relations and philanthropic outreach for the organization. She ensures the Bulls community partnerships are focused on youth, health, and wellness. I'm going to say that one more time. Youth, health, and wellness. Youth education, violence prevention, and watch this, military and first responder support and creating an impact in the Chicagoland area. That's right. Prior to joining the Bulls, Adrienne spent 5 years with After School Matters, which is where I met her. That's right. As Chief Operating Officer. Listen to this. And previously as Chief Program Officer. So Adrienne has also worked for the Chicago Public Schools, in which I'm a product of, and other education-focused organizations in Chicago and Philadelphia. What up, Philly? She graduated from Syracuse University and Rosalind Franklin University of Medicine and Science. Powerful woman. Adrienne is happy to call Chicago home for more than 12 years with her husband, Roy, and daughter, River. Welcome to the Born to Win podcast. How you feeling today, Miss Adrienne Curry?
Feeling great. I have to say, born to win. I feel like born to. This is your. When I talk about your purpose, this is you, Vondale. You're in your zone right now. I love it. I love it. This is great. Thanks for having me. I'm so thrilled that you invited me to be on here.
I'm super excited to have you. And for our viewing audience, I would love for them to hear who you are. Tell us your story, Adrienne, because I'm just like blown away. I listened to the last podcast and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that about her. So please tell our viewing audience across this world who you are.
You know, in that podcast, I talked about being originally from Canada. So I was born in Montreal. Moved to Toronto, which is in Ontario. And, I have a funny sort of background. I think, personally, my parents are both immigrants. My mom's from Kingston, Jamaica, and my dad's from Vienna, Austria. So you can imagine growing up, it was like jerk chicken one day and, Wiener Schnitzel the next day. So yes, that was my upbringing. I don't know. I think I've always had this kind of mentality of like, if there's something that I can do to be better, if I'm trying my best, then I guess that then I want to know that I put everything into it, even if I might not be the best at something. So I have a twin sister. Both of us ran in high school, and there's a big, it's funny, it's International Women's Month, but there's also a lot of talk about women in sports and equity in sports. And you see a lot of girls as you get through high school start to really drop out. I always say this, I wasn't necessarily the fastest, but there were so many girls that were faster, but just kind of fell out of the sport, which is a shame. I look back today and I'm just like, wow, that person was so good. They could have been, so many things. And so anyway, I stuck with it. My sister and I both stuck with it. And we were at a track meet in Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada. And our coach, soon to be coach, came and saw us. And he he approached our coach and he said, who are those two girls? We were running 400 hurdles at the time. And when you go to college, I think for athletics, there's two different types of coaches. You have a coach who's like, this person's top, and I'm going to just be great. And I have this team full of all these amazing, amazing athletes. And there's other coaches that are like, that person's really good, and I'm going to make them even better. So some coaches like to work to get kids to get better, and some are just like, give me who's the top already. So you'll have different kind of coaches. It just depends on their skill level and which university they're at. So he was definitely the type that I think we were, top-ish, but we weren't the top. Okay. And so for him, he really saw my sister and I, and he just, and this is the coach at Syracuse University. So, he, talked to our coach at the time about it. And it's interesting because, oh my God, I'm giving you so many stories I haven't told a lot of people, but when he talked to our coach from Syracuse, when he talked to our high school coach said, oh, you don't want those two. You want these other two girls on my team. But luckily, my coach is stubborn and said, no, I want those two. He didn't listen to him at all. And so I'd say like he really changed our life, changed our trajectory. And so Syracuse University was perfectly placed for my parents. They're like, it's 4 hours away from Canada. It's also 4 hours from New York City, which is close to where the rest of my family sort of lived. And so for us, it made a lot of sense. It was a top university. It was great. And so we, both of us moved to the United States, went to Syracuse, ran track there for 4 years, and got a lot better. Our coach was always like, just listen to me and you'll be fine. And it was fine. We just kind of took those marching orders, and we, had really successful careers. From there, I knew I wanted to get into something with medicine. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And so our coach was like, well, talk to this guy in town. He's a podiatrist, a foot doctor. And so I talked to him, and he's like, yeah, it's a great career, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. I didn't have a lot of direction. My parents were just like, and you'll find this with a lot of parents, and you sort of have like first generation kids that go to university. They're just like, right, go to university. Something will happen. And, but I don't know what the what is, right? I don't know what's going to happen. You may or may not have internship opportunities. I couldn't really have tons because we were running at the time. You may or may not have sort of mentors at school. So how do you know what you really want to do? And so I feel like my whole life, I've always sort of worked in areas where I try to help youth figure out what do they want to do. Jump forward to After School Matters. That's where some of that came in. But so I was like, okay, sounds good. I'm applying to podiatry school. So I applied to a couple schools, one in Philadelphia, which I ended up there later anyways, but applied to one in Chicago. I liked the one in Chicago better. I came here, didn't know what I was doing, and went through school, and I was like, this is okay, but I didn't love it. Yeah. And it was hard because I was like, there's something about this I do like, but there's a lot of it I don't like. And I kind of kept going through. And then when I was in my third year, I did a public health fellowship, which everybody would be like, what is that? Until now, everyone knows what public health is because of we're in the middle of a COVID crisis. So I did a public health fellowship. And I remember, Vondale, just being like, we would have meetings, and I would remember thinking, this is like the best thing ever. I love this program. I could talk about these issues forever. And one thing I always tell you, a lot of times when people ask me, like, how do you figure out what you want to do? It's always like, what's that class or that subject where you could have talked about this forever? Or you could have, didn't want the conversation to end. Like that kind of gives you a little view into like, what are you passionate about, which was great. So I was like, I think I'm going to drop out and get a master's in public health. And so one of our clinical staff was like, don't do that. Listen, just keep going. You can still do public health as a practitioner if you really want to do it. And by then I was like almost in my fourth year.
Got it.
Which is a lot. So as I finished, I applied to a bunch of programs in Chicago, and I applied to one in New York. And of course I get matched with the one in New York. So you hear about this match day, and it is a big deal. Match day is always like, where do you end up going, for your residency is a big deal. So I ended up going to New York. I got married right before we left. So my husband and I both went to New York. And it was great. It was great because I think everyone needs to live in New York at one point. It's crowded and it is expensive, but I think at one point everyone needs to live there. It's fantastic. There's so much energy there, which I loved. But I realized when I was in my residency, I still was like, I still don't love this. and so that's important though. Yeah, like Vondale, it's important sometimes, I think, when you do work to figure out like what you don't like is just as important as what you do like. That's right. I think that kind of helps you know, and I think a lot of times people see someone today and they don't know all the pathways they took to how they got to where they got to and the failures they had along the way. You only see the person today, but there is so many failures, so many flubs along the way, but it makes you better. Which is good.
One thing that I wanted to bring up real quick, because you have a very powerful story. And the thing that I love is that you talked about your twin, right? So like you went on a different journey, Canadian. Now you ended up New York. Now you're in the Windy City, Chicago. So if you can just talk a little bit about just how did you end up on a journey that you ended up on?
I just kept on. I mean, I said, I was like, this is not what I want. I knew what I didn't want. And I was like, let's, for my journey, I always liked science. I always liked science. That was always something since I was young. I always remember I did like science. I liked math. I was very sort of analytical. And I love those kind of pieces. And so that really helped. I was in undergrad, I was like a psychology/biology major. And so when I went to medical school, it was like, seemed like the natural next step, so after I finished my residency, I had the opportunity to work in the school district of Philadelphia. The superintendent there used to be the superintendent here in Chicago. And so I went over there and he kind of, helped me get a role there to work in their health areas, which was great. But I think people felt like I was sort of put on them a little bit. And so I think it was tough in the beginning. There was a lot of people that were like, what are you doing here? Are you going to really do anything? And what I did, and I've always done this, I think on my journey, is really say, projects would come up and nobody would want to do it. I would raise my hand and say, I'll do it. And then before you know it, I had like a whole portfolio of things that I was working on. And one of the last things that we worked on, I'm not sure if I brought this up, I think I might have on the podcast, was a pandemic plan, which we were like, we are going to need this. And I won't tell you what year it was that we did that. But we had the World Health Organization, the CDC. Again, these are organizations that, a year ago nobody would know who they are, but now you do.
Everybody knows now.
And they were with us at the table doing planning. What does it mean if you had to shut the city down because there was a pandemic? How would you feed everybody? All these things that keep coming up now. I was like, oh my God, we totally talked about this, and it was amazing. It was just amazing to have that experience. And from there, I came to Chicago. So I started my education sort of career in sort of with a health twist. Came to Chicago. Was able to work as a senior policy advisor. And one thing I do have to say about the education field is a lot of times they will give you an opportunity, but it's what are you going to do with that opportunity when you get the opportunity? And then a lot of times there's a lot of mistakes along the way. I have too many. I know some of the questions you have later on for me are about failure. I'm like, where do I start? I'm like, do you have all day to talk about the things that I've...
Yeah. And I think like with your journey too, it's important for those who are listening, and wherever you are, just know in life, you may have a purpose in life, a journey, and it may seem insurmountable to you. But the powerful thing is, like, through those obstacles, we learn. And so if you can just talk to us about some of the obstacles that you had to overcome to get into the position that you're in today.
Sure. I think some of the obstacles that come up are around, sometimes people don't even think that, I mean, this is the thing. If you're Black, you have to sort of prove yourself a little bit more than everyone. You've got to be super, a lot more prepared. A lot more times there's not much, error there's not much margin for error at all. And being a female as well, you also being for a professional sports team, a lot of times there has traditionally been a lot of men that work in the sports field. And I remember when I got this position, someone said to me, oh, I heard that they were going to give this position to a female. As if I didn't have qualifications to do the job.
Right.
And so it's like, I think what I do for the Bulls is community relations, but it's a position that's taken all of my experiences I've ever had and put them together into one position. So one of our big pillars is health and wellness. So I bring in all my medical experience all the time around that.
Love it.
Education, youth development, all of that I've had to bring in as well. And, did a lot of work, obviously, with first responders, veterans, not so much before, but all these pieces of, like, it's one of these things where it's like I'd say a non-traditional sort of work experience, but it actually totally works for this position. It all comes together.
And you know what? That's what I want to tell everybody. Is like, you may be at a job that you really don't care for right now, but you're 18, you're 19, and you never know when it's going to cycle back or circle back around, right, in your career later on. And so what I hear you saying is the time that you spent at Syracuse, the time that you spent in the medical field learning the science of medicine, right, you're able to apply in the work that you do today. And here's what I want to tell everybody. You don't have to throw everything away when failures or obstacles arise, right? There's something called hope. And I want to ask Adrienne, like, how do you define hope?
Hope to me is like sending love to the future.
Oh, hold on. You got to say that one more time, please.
Hope to me is sending love to the future, because that's all we have at the end of the day is hope. And you see when people lose hope, then there's nothing there. So you're saying, I'm sending all this love because there's something great. I'm looking forward. I'm looking ahead, and you see there's stories, all kinds of stories about what happens when you look back. It's always about looking ahead and sending love to the future. Like this is, I see my pathway and it's riddled with love the whole way. That's having hope. That
is deep. That's going to be a quotable, by the way. I'm just letting you know ahead of time. We're going to take that. We're going to put your name on it. So for me, I'm really big on energy. I'm really big on like the youth and just the empowerment and seeing youth develop, because I believe my family of origin, it gave me the courage to have hope and to believe. And then sometimes, we get caught up into just this nostalgia of the 80s and the 90s. Like, I remember a time where the Bulls, you couldn't go around this city without seeing a Bulls sticker on every basketball court. Like in the 90s, we were winning championships. Michael Jordan was at his all-time high. And really, I believe the NBA became global through the Chicago Bulls, like single-handedly. And it's amazing to be able to have that history and to be a part of that history. And so what are some of your favorite memories you've had about growing up, and what lessons did you learn from them?
My family didn't have a lot really growing up. I know this is so cliche. We didn't have a lot growing up. Everyone says this, right? And so when we would do family vacations, a lot of times we'd go camping. A lot of times we were like the only Black family that's out there camping, but it's because camping costs at the time was like $8 or $10 a night. It was not much at all. And I think one of the lessons I really learned from camping, those are like some great memories, is sort of learning how to sort of be with yourself, be independent, and not need a lot of things around you. Because, camping is like, you literally have to, like, if you have to pitch your tent, because if you don't pitch your tent, you've got, where are you going to sleep, and you've got to cook all your own meals. You can't go buy them or anything like that. And a lot of times you're out there, it gets really cold at night. Even in the summer, it gets really cold. There's a lot of noises that you're like, what is that? I've never heard that before. Is there a bear out there? Is there, a lot of times there's raccoons, which are pretty vicious actually sometimes, but it's like sort of, there's so many thoughts you have. And if anyone's ever gone camping also, what's the most impressive thing is actually when you look up in the sky, when there's not as much city lights, you can see all the stars, and there's so many stars that are around you constantly. You just actually don't even realize it because the city lights kind of block it out.
Right.
And so when you go out there, then it becomes this whole nother world, even though you may just be an hour or two from your home. So I think, like, for me, that was like one of my favorite memories. And then really growing up, it just really sort of taught me that I can, you can sort of, you learn how to, I know it sounds really cliche, but live off the land. Like, if I had to, I could figure that out. Right? It's like not my favorite thing to do, but I could figure out how to start a fire, all these things. But I think that it's just like, how do you kind of strip yourself down to what the bare necessities, and those are just memories I'll never, ever forget.
That is so awesome. So like, we spoke a little bit earlier about failures, and I want to kind of dive into this a little bit deeper, because I think sometimes we can perceive a failure to be a failure, and really it's a life lesson. Like, do you have a favorite failure of yours, or something that maybe you didn't see at the moment would be a life lesson, but it was kind of a failure? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think Yeah, this one's hard because I think there's so many. Like I seriously, there's so many failures I've had, and I think I would kind of categorize them in sort of two ways, not necessarily like a thing, but sort of like two sort of categories. One is maybe not speaking up for myself or not speaking my truth, and the other is not being prepared.
Those are really good.
And those they have bitten me in the butt if I've ever done either one of those, you know. And I think today I try to really make sure that even though it becomes sometimes it's uncomfortable sometimes to speak your truth. A lot of times if I'm on a call or if I'm in a meeting, I kind of force myself. I sit there and I say, I'm not leaving until I get this out. It might not be received really well, or it might make someone else feel uncomfortable, but I've got to get this out, because if you walk away and it's not clear that that's what you're saying, then you're just sort of then you're not being really true to yourself. And that's even when if you have to even when you become a supervisor in Vondale, you're an assistant principal, so you don't know all this. When you're supervising people, you have to give them feedback. And I think a lot of times, I think that's part of it too, is saying, if I see someone not doing a good job on something, I cannot leave here until I tell them that I'm seeing something, but I know that they can do better. It's not just deliver criticism for the sake of criticism, but I think a lot of times when when people hire people of color, a lot of times they don't always give them feedback. And a lot of times no one's told you that you're not doing a good job. And it's like, they don't understand that's hurting us by not being prepared. Just showing up and being like, I can wing this. Never wing it. Like, you've got to absolutely be prepared. And so I over prepare. And that's a good thing. I'd rather be over prepared than not. I'd rather even prepare for the wrong thing than not prepare for anything, at the same time as well. But I think it's I can't emphasize the need for being prepared if it's getting ready to go into surgery, if it's getting ready to speak on a podcast, if it's getting ready to do an interview. How do you make sure that you're prepared? And even when I interviewed for my position with the Chicago Bulls, I was completely flattered because I had a recruiter reach out to me, which was great. But every single interview I had, I made sure I prepared. I gave myself that time. I gave myself the time the day of to make sure I was prepared. And then it became so much easier. It was probably one of the easiest interview process I had with the Bulls, is because I was so prepared. I mean, also it was touching on things that I knew the answer to. These were things that I've lived every day, but I was prepared as well. I didn't take that for granted.
That is so powerful. My mentor used to always say, never, ever delay your preparation time. He said, preparation time is never wasted time. And he used to always talk about that. And I didn't really understand at the time what he meant by that. But as I got older, I realized that you can never over prepare, right? Because you don't know when the next moment, next opportunity, and your preparation time is never wasted time. So I love it. So I got to ask this question. Every guest that comes on the Born to Win podcast got to give us a billboard phrase, right? So if you can have any words up in a large billboard, we on 94, the Dan Ryan, everybody see the big billboard right there. What words, Adrienne, would you have on that billboard? And can you tell us why?
The billboard would say, you didn't get this far just to get this far.
Ooh, you didn't get this far just to get this far. Come on now, talk a little bit more on that.
I think a lot of times it's I think this concept of being humble and being hungry always comes up. And I talked about this before, but like this hungry piece, like, you've got to stay hungry. And part of that is saying, don't just kick your feet up, even when you think you've gotten to where you've gotten to. And I think part of it you get when you're an athlete. Like, there's always, like, if you're a runner like I was, there's always someone 5 years younger than you and a million times faster than you. There's always someone faster and someone better than you. So it's like, don't just get this far and sit on your laurels, or just know, like, even if you get to a certain point and it's hard, you didn't get that far just to get that far. You didn't get there it's going to be hard, so then it's going to fall apart. No, you got there because you need to get there, and it's a step to something else. So it's like embracing some of these challenges, embracing the failure, every step that you have, you're getting there just to get to a better place, but you've got to stay hungry about it, and you've got to, prepare yourself. I think, when talking about that earlier, it's like whenever I have a reoccurring dream, like the reoccurring nightmare, it's always that I'm not prepared for like a race, but that's just like a metaphor for not being prepared for anything. And so it's weird. It's always like, it's like today, and I'm getting into a track meet, and I'm like horrified because I'm like, I'm not ready. I would have trained another 2 months if you had told me, this is a recurring dream. But it's, again, how do you stay hungry, but also realizing don't just rest. Like you're never, even when you get to the point, like you always have to stay fresh. Like you see companies, you see that they fall out of fashion. You see if it's artists, if it's athletes, whatever it is. Like Kobe's an excellent example of this. I mean, he's just like, he was good. He wasn't great, but he was like, he got to the league and realized, hey, a lot of people don't push themselves as hard. I'm going to have a great time here. And he pushed himself. I mean, you always see the videos and people don't talk about all the time how much he really, really, really practiced. Like all this stuff, it looks easy, or you see the end product, but people understand all the work that goes behind it. Same thing when you think of someone, even like an artist, even like Justin Bieber, like you don't understand like all the work he had to do to get to that point. It wasn't just like, it sounded like, oh, he was a YouTube kid. You're like, yeah, but he was doing a lot of work.
Exactly.
There's a lot of work behind all of this. Right.
Exactly. And speaking of like teenage years, so like if you can describe a time between 14 and 20 that you would consider a transformational experience, right? Like, can you talk about that, and how has it worked in your favor to this day?
I kind of go back to another sports analogy here. I had a coach though when I was in high school, not the coach who said we shouldn't be getting recruited by this coach. This was another coach I had at the very end, who was fantastic. And I think I just didn't have a lot of confidence growing up, and I think I didn't have a lot of confidence in my running abilities either. And there was, some girls that had always been sort of at this top sort of level. And then by the time I was a senior, I was like, I think I'm actually at their level. Like I don't, they're not like, like people, like you catch up to people if you keep working, And I remember it was one of my last races I had in high school. And this girl who had always been just really sort of like an elite runner. I remember my coach really looking at me and saying, okay, let's put a plan together for this race. Like, this is what's going to happen. This girl's run this other race before. When you get to this point, you're going to go right by her, blah, 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 blah. And to me, it was like, and that's the thing that's so powerful about sports. A lot of times it's like, my parents were not big on compliments. It's just who they are. It's fine, right?
Yeah.
With this, I think you had the same parents I had, right? So with this coach, it was great because he just sort of looked at me and was like, you're going to do this. And like, I, executed the plan flawlessly. It was, but it was almost easy at a certain point. So, and that's good because it was like I was prepared, but she really just kind of looked at me and gave me that confidence that you can do this. And no one had really ever done that. A lot of times with sport, coaches lump a lot of people together, but there isn't always a lot of individualized sort of like talking to somebody sometimes what you need. And going back to the 80s, going back to the 90s, you talk about Phil Jackson and why he was so, at the time, such a this is like a revolutionary coach and everything. Is because he took the time to figure out what the individuals each need on his team. And you saw this, of course, when you saw The Last Dance. He figured out, I need to do this for Dennis. I need to do this for Scott. I need this for Michael. Everyone needed something different. And he took the time to kind of talk to them and figure that out. And so that was new at that time. I'm going to date myself, but so like for him to actually my coach to spend that time with me to say, you can actually do this with some of these girls that had always been they seemed like sort of untouchable to me. It changed my sort of perspective on myself. It changed, like, I was like, well, I can do this. And there isn't anyone that I can't hang with. If it's in work, I can't hang with anyone. If it's got to do with sport or whatever it may be, I can hang with whoever, if I put my mind to it really and really prepare.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like watching you, I would think people would think you never had a confidence problem, right? You've always been this way. And I think it's important for people to understand that, some moments in our life are meant to challenge us, right? It's to get the better self out. So that coach, that guide, that teacher that is always correcting your paper and telling you to resubmit it and resubmit it and resubmit it and resubmit it. And it's just like, oh, here we go again. but that's part of the process. And I want to give Adrienne just kind of any last words that you want to just share about yourself, about your personal life, about just what the Bulls have coming up, anything that you want to share in these last couple seconds.
I think part of it is what you said is like the corrections you're getting along your life. A lot of it is just it's a lot of it's redirection, but you have to be open to it too. So a lot of times it's going to hurt when someone's giving you redirection. So, but always be open to it. Don't necessarily react in the time, but kind of think about it a little bit more. And one thing I like to say, and we pivot a little bit to the Bulls, is when I joined the team, I knew that we did not have our team was not necessarily a winning team at the time, but that's exactly why I wanted to join the team. And this is like the day after the trade deadline. And Vondale, I know you're a basketball aficionado, so you saw there's been some really aggressive and bold moves made by the organization. And that's exactly why I wanted to join. I was like, it's time to join. Don't always join at the top. It's good to join some things and make it better. Like, what can you do to make things better? Vondale, you do that every day. You're not necessarily just walking into something that's already built and something and kids that have got it going on. You're like, I'm going to get in there and make things better. So what are you going to do to make things better? And how can you use your voice and your power to do that? I had a mentor before who always said, people are always going to give you luck. They're going to make luck for you. But what are you going to do to make luck for somebody else? And so I think, I'm so excited about the direction of the team. It's not my job to talk about that, but I am so excited about it because I think it's some bold moves that are being made. And I think, this is exactly why I wanted to join, to say, I'm going to build the team's building. I'm going to build with you as well.
Thank you so much, Adrienne, for taking out your time to join the Born to Win podcast. I can't wait for everyone to see and hear this wonderful podcast. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to make sure that you tune in on the next episode. Remember, we're in Spotify, we're in iTunes, we're in Pandora, we're on YouTube, we're everywhere. We want to reach as many individuals as we can. And again, thank you so much, Adrienne, for your time.
The Born to Win podcast highlights individuals excelling at high levels in their purpose and calling. This podcast is for anyone looking to get ahead in life and willing to take action and reach their full potential. Using C.H.A.M.P.S male mentoring model of the 3 E's, education, empowerment, and exposure, it means you too are born to win.
I'm born to win, live. The Jets from Chicago be screaming all that. You are now tuned in to the